Okay, so we're jumping back into part 3 of this course. And again, I'm going to try to keep it at 20 minutes just so I don't long wind you guys with all this information. So, when we left off, we were talking about ways that you can negotiate with your broker slash shipper um, to make more money and to maximize the payments for the load. And in that, I mentioned about the debt heading either to the origin or coming from the origin. So to tie into that, leading into the next subject is backhauling. So you never want to leave your driver empty coming back home. So after you book that first load for your driver, you always want to make sure you have a load for him or her coming back home. You don't want to leave them empty because they're not making any money, like I said before. And if you constantly leave them empty coming back home, they will jump ship to a new dispatcher because you are not maximizing and utilizing their truck the way that it should be. So don't think just because you book that one load, like, okay, boom, like that's good, we good. No, you have to find him or her something coming back home. And when you do that, you're going to use the same strategy that you use going to that origin, coming out of that origin. And, again, that is you doing the max weight, the dimensions of the truck, the type of equipment. The only thing that changes is the destination coming out of that origin and going either. So your driver is either going back home or he's going to another state, somewhere else. But I'm assume 9 times out of 10, the driver is trying to make his way back home because you also have to keep in mind they have to reset um their time. I believe it's every 10 or 11 hours they have to be on reset. So they cannot drive past a certain time. They do have to stop. And if your driver is one of the ones who don't go over the road, then you probably won't experience that issue because your driver is pretty much one and done. So after he's finished with the load that he is taken to, depending on how far it is, he may not have time to bring anything back home. So he's just going straight home and to go back to reset. So it just all depends on what type of driver that you get when you are, booking their loads and working with them. Um, so with that being said, too, you can search on the load board and look for, backhauls coming out of wherever your carrier is going. When speaking to brokers, like I said, you do want to try to build those relationships so you can get on the email list so you don't have to keep calling them whenever you are trying to book their load. Like, for instance, like I had a broker who I had a relationship with. So every time a load came up and he knew my driver was in the area, he would reach out to me to see if my driver could run that route instead of him reaching out to other people. So when you got good relationship with brokers, you will probably be their first point of contact before they go to reach out to someone else. So keep that in mind and always try to get their information if you can. Now, say we're at the point where, okay, you've done your load successfully and now you are, well, you didn't do the load, but the load went successful and now your driver is ready to get paid and so are you. So here's how that works. If your driver has a factoring company, he or she can get paid within like 2 days, like a day or to 2 days. If your driver does not have a factoring company, then sometimes it can take up to 30 days for that broker to pay that driver. But with the factoring company is like the middleman. It's like the bank. The bank will pretty much front the broker's money and give it to their driver. And then the factoring company will get their money on the back end. Most drivers do have that. In instances that they don't, they'll most likely wait up until the 30 days. Not saying that it will take the full 30 days, but up until 30 days, meaning you'll be waiting too. So you want to try to stick with drivers that actually work with factoring companies. And remember how I talked about ways that you can, also extend your services by, submitting them BOLs on behalf of your driver to those factoring companies. So that way, you can make sure your driver gets paid. So when it comes to like the pay schedule, like you and your driver needs to come up with a set schedule on like when and how they're going to pay you. And the good, like one of the good things to do is send your driver an invoice for payment. So whether that is weekly for you, monthly, bi-weekly, however that looks like for you, you want to make sure y'all stick to that schedule, and you want to make sure you are sending them invoices out, because a lot of times your driver is not going to say to you like, hey, I need to pay you, don't forget to send me that invoice. So it's up to you. It's your job to send that invoice. You can either use Zelle, you can use PayPal, you can use Square, you can use Cash App. Cash App I really wouldn't use because that's like really tacky and that's not business like, and it's not professional. But most importantly, if anything goes wrong, like you're not getting like your money back from Cash App. Like it's really hard to get your money from Cash App, back from Cash App, and you're gonna run into some struggles with that situation. So I would really advise you to stay away from Cash App. Square, they do have a payment system where you can send invoices as well, as getting paid through their platform. PayPal, I am an advocate for PayPal. I stand on PayPal. I use PayPal. But one thing you want to keep in mind with PayPal is when you have a new business and you're just starting out with them, they will put your money, some of your money on hold. They do charge a percentage, but they'll put some of your money on hold just because they, I guess, want to get like a track record of how like your money is coming in, how much is coming in, but also making sure you're not like a scammy business and you're not just out here scamming people. So they will put your money on hold. Well, some of it. Zelle is pretty good as well. And you can also send your invoices through Zelle. And especially if you are going through your bank with Zelle, that is really good as well. But you definitely want some type of support when it comes to sending out them e-voices, and you want to make sure you have a good customer support system so that, when something does go wrong, you can reach out to them and they can get back to you. So again, I personally use PayPal, but you guys can choose what you want when it comes to these platforms. But you do want to make sure that you get paid from your carrier. And that section was on invoicing. Now, here's the issue when your driver doesn't want to pay you. And as you guys know, that's a part of life, that's a part of business. That can happen in any business where you provide a service and don't get paid for it for whatever reason. So in situations like these, and your carrier doesn't want to pay, you can like refuse to book future loads for them, which I'm pretty sure you will not want to book a load for them anyway if they're not going to pay you. Or if you feel like you're in a situation where your driver looks sketchy and you feel like they may not pay, then what you want to do is charge them up front, for that load that you're about to book for them. You can charge them up front and do that as well, just to make sure that you are guaranteed your money. I don't know how many drivers will are willing to pay you up front, but it's a take it or leave it type of thing, with certain drivers that you can do that with. Um, and then you also can take them to like a small claims court, but that's going to cost you money in the end, and that's going to cost you your time. I don't know if you're willing to waste that time, or the resources, or depending on how long it's going to take to resolve the issue and get your money back. But you also can take them to claims court. So, keep that in mind. So, keep that, keep that in mind. But you also too can charge your carriers late fees. So like let's say if they were supposed to pay you on a Monday and they didn't pay you till like Wednesday, you can add an additional fee on top of that and let them know, now they have to pay a late fee because they didn't pay you on time. But also you want to put that, make that full disclosure in the beginning, and add that into your contract. Like, listen, like there is a penalty, if I get paid late, like you will be charged that penalty. Because just like they're operating a business, so are you. Um, and so this next part is talking about submitting paperwork to the factoring companies. Like I was telling y'all before about how you can submit the paperwork on behalf of your carrier for that, for them to get paid. Um, So I'll just go ahead and read it to you. So it says, once your carrier has finished out his load and gets the BOL signed from the shipper, they will need to send an invoice to the factoring company. If you are the one handling all the administrative work, then you will be the one to submit the invoice. When submitting the invoice, you will need to have the rate con and the NBOL so that your carrier can get paid. You want to make sure you do a credit check on the broker to make sure they are factorable, because if not, your carrier will have a harder time getting paid. It's best that you stay away from brokers that are not factorable. It's very likely they will not pay the factoring company, or you will take longer paying the factoring company. So I want to touch on this a little bit, because when it comes to brokers, before you work with a broker, like say you're in communication with a broker and you guys are about to secure this load, you want to make sure that you do a credit check on the broker as well. Because when you do that credit check and they come back um, in not good standings, then you're more likely to get like the crappy end of the stick or a bad deal out of it all. And you run the risk of getting played and not getting paid. So you definitely want to do your credit checks. And when it comes to the factoring companies, you want to make sure you have a credit check done, because if they have a low credit rating, then that means that they're not paying the factoring companies on time. They're not, doing what they're supposed to do. And them factoring companies are not making money from them brokers for whatever reason. And so that's showing you that you're going to have a harder time getting paid, and so is your driver. So you definitely want to stay away from the ones that have like a low credit score. I always say stay like 90 and above. I wouldn't go lower than like a 90. If you go lower than a 90 for whatever reason, I say the lowest is a 80. Other than that, like I wouldn't mess with it, because like you just never know. Like you never know. Um, Working with brokers that work with new authorities, when you want to keep that in mind when you're approaching your carriers and you're getting carriers. You want to make sure that they are past at least like 60 days of experience, because anything less than that, the brokers really don't want to work with them, because they don't have a track record, they don't have a footprint, they don't have nothing that shows that they are worthy to not worthy, but they can be trusted to carry that freight. And so the broker will tell you like, hey, we can't work with your driver because they're new or whatever the case. They'll let you know, like, because the brokers, when you give them, because one of the first things the broker is going to ask you for is the MC um authority number, and they're going to ask you for the DOT number. When they ask you for those numbers, they're running your driver's information. So if anything comes back that warrants attention, where it raises a red flag or anything, the broker is not going to work with them, and they'll let you know. So you want to keep that in mind and kind of stay away from new drivers. But if you like a challenge and you want to operate in good faith, then by all means take a chance, because you never know what'll come out of you working with that carrier. But I will say there are some companies out here that will work with new carriers. And I'll, as you can see, the list is here. You got Night Transportation, you got Edge Logistics, Chicago, you got England Logistics, Lipsy, you got Logistics, you got TQL, you have CH Robinson, Trinity Logistics, Fifth Wheel, you have Freight Management, Regal Specialty, KCH Transportation, and Online Transportation. So those are the people that are more likely to work with um, new carriers. And then that also would lead me into this next point. So when you're dealing with a new carrier, brokers are more likely to try to lowball you guys, and they'll try to have that carrier move that freight for a lower amount than what they would um, have a more experienced driver do. So you want to keep that in mind. When you are when you're charging your drivers your rate, like make sure your rate is competitive, but make sure it's not like too much where the driver is going to be like, oh no, you charge too much just to move my load and you not even doing no work, or it's too low that they're just like, oh, why are they willing to move freight for such a low price? So like a good medium is between 7 to 10%. Like I feel like that's good, between like 7 to 10, especially if you're a new dispatcher. You want to like kind of keep it in the medium until you start getting that experience where you know your work is good and you know you got this, and you can start charging more for what you're doing. And then, especially like I said, if you have those additional services that you're charging, especially for like administrative stuff, then you definitely can include that into that rate and sell yourself that way, and let them know like, hey, not only am I moving helping you find the load, but I'm also willing to submit your BOLs. I'm also willing to, read over your paperwork, and just do certain things that, that they have to do, but are not willing to do. Um, but don't be so desperate where you charge yourself such a low rate that you are not making no money off that load, because when them loads are successful and you see that driver making all that money and you only got that little portion of it, you gonna kick yourself in the butt because you're gonna be like, darn, I should have charged more than what I charged. So you want to make sure you stay ahead of that. Um, So and then you can also talk to your carrier and ask them like, what is the rate that, they're willing to, like, what is the rate per mile they're willing to take? Because you can calculate that in too. So like, let's say if they're willing to do like 6% per mile, you can so like when you're asking your driver, like, what is the you know, how much are you willing to do per mile? So say if your fee is like, let's just say you got a fee of 6%, and your driver is saying like, I'm not moving nothing less than $3 a mile. So what you want to do is you want to, do the math on that and factor that in so that everybody can get a good rate for that. So let's just say like John is looking for $3 a mile, and you found a load going to Atlanta for 800 loaded miles, and the posted mile is for 2,000. So in order for you to get your carrier at $3 per mile, you got to multiply your rate times your loaded miles, which will give you, of how much needs to be made for that load. So you're going to include the 6% that you charge on top of um, that, which is going to be 2,400 times 6%, which will give you $144. So you need to tack on the $144 to the 2,000 miles. I mean, to the 2,000. So that way the total would be at least $2,544. And then that way you are taking your cut out of the broker's portion instead of your driver. drivers. And I'm not sure if I told you or not, but that is another way to sell yourself as a dispatcher, letting your driver know, like, my percentage doesn't come out of your cut, it comes out of the broker's cut. So when you're doing that, the driver is looking at it like, oh, well, technically, I'm not really giving them anything because they're going to get their cut from the broker when they are booking that load. So pretty much what's happening is you're adding your percentage into that rate. So you gonna get your money and he gonna get his money, and that way it's a win-win for everybody, and nobody's losing out. There are some fees that remember how I was telling y'all about like the negotiation, ways to negotiate. Like there are some other fee, like there are fees that you can, add into the equation, which we kind of already talked about. And we can just go over them really quick, and you guys can see it because you have the paper in front of you. But you have the layover pay. I don't believe we went over the layover pay. No, we did. The layover pay was when I told y'all, like, if the broker if the driver has to hold on to that freight for X amount of time, he's losing money because he could be getting freight and moving, his other freight and making money. So that layover pay is something that you could be charging your brokers if they have to hold that for X amount of days. You got the detention pay, which is a penalty a carrier may place on the concierge or consi if the truck is held beyond a reasonable period. So you can actually tack on a percentage per hour or a dollar amount per hour that they have to hold on to that freight. You got extra stops, like I explained to you before. You got the load and unload. If your driver has to either load or unload the freight, he's charging for that. The tarp pay, like I was telling y'all about the tarps covering the freight. The accessorial pay is the compensation expected by a carrier for anything other than the pickup and delivery. So if your broker is asking you to do anything extra, if you want to, you can charge a fee for that as well. Claim, you can charge a fee for that. That is the process of recovery from a carrier in or is insurance underwriter for excessive charges, loss, or damage to the load, delay in delivery, etc., or demand. Made upon a transportation line for payment on account of a loss sustained through its alleged negligence. So keep that in mind. Then you got your fuel charges, additional compensation to carrier when fuel prices increase. You can charge for that too. Like, listen, gas is a certain amount of money per mile. Like, I need to be compensated for my gas. And then you have the cents per mile, which you guys know, like that's what we are talking about. Like when your driver is moving his freight, he's not willing to go anything under $3 or $2 per mile. So that's the cents per mile. You got your lumper, and then you got your time fee that is also, plays a part in those fees as well. So you guys want to definitely take advantage of some of these things when you are booking those loads and trying to maximize the amount for those loads, because not only do you want to maximize the funds for yourself, you want to maximize them for your driver too, because when you're making your driver money, he's happy and he's satisfied, and he's going to continue to use you and think about you every time he needs to run and do a load. So you want to keep that in mind as well. um I believe we went over the equipment type. If we didn't, we can go over those. So when I learned about the industry of dispatching, I learned the easiest things to move, which are reefers, drive-ins, and flatbeds. Those are like the easiest things that you can move because they don't really hold a lot of restriction when it comes to moving freight, and they can get the most out of the freight. And so, like, I was always taught like to start off with them. Some people will take a challenge, and I noticed like a lot of people will run those box trucks. But sometimes those can be hard depending on like how big they are. Because if you have the smaller box truck, then you are going to be your driver is going to be limited as to what he can haul inside that box truck. So you want to be careful with the box trucks. From as long as I've been in the industry, I was always told that box trucks are a little harder. But with the reefers, you have a 53-foot reefer, you have a 53-foot drive-in, and then you have the 48 or 53 flatbed. And as you can see, I do input pictures for you to see what those look like, um, just to give you a visual of that. The reefers are pretty much like the refrigerated trucks where they keep things, cool, whether like you carrying like meats, ice creams, whatever. Like that's the like pretty much refrigerated stuff. The drive-ins are the ones, they're doing like all the dry goods, anything that doesn't need to go in the refrigerator. Those are what the drive-in trailers are doing. Now the flatbeds, they pretty much most of the time you'll see them hauling like lumber and either like maybe other vehicles or like those big industrial refrigerators like and stuff like that. Like you'll see them hauling that type of stuff. But those are the main three um vehicles that you want to stick with. Not saying that you can't work with any other vehicle